The Millionaire's twins refused to speak. Until the new maid did this. The silence inside the mansion was so heavy that it seemed to swallow every sound. Even the ticking of the expensive grandfather clock echoed through the halls like a lonely heartbeat. The servants whispered. The teachers gave up. The doctors shook their heads and left. And the two children at the center of it all never spoke a single word. Not because they couldn't. Because they wouldn't. The millionaire father had spent 3 years trying to bring back their voices, but nothing worked. Then one ordinary maid arrived at the mansion, and what she did changed everything. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love to heal broken hearts, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories. The story took place in Connecticut, United States. Jonathan Parker was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state. At 46 years old, he owned several successful companies, lived in a magnificent estate, and appeared to have everything a person could dream of. But behind the luxurious walls of his mansion lived a man carrying a pain that money could never erase. 3 years earlier, Jonathan's wife, Rebecca, had passed away unexpectedly after a brief illness. The loss shattered the family. Their twin children, 11-year-old Ethan and Grace, had been especially close to their mother. Rebecca had been their entire world. She read bedtime stories every night, packed their lunches every morning, and somehow made every ordinary day feel magical. When she died, something inside the twins broke. At first, everyone assumed they were grieving. Then weeks became months. Months became years. And the twins still refused to speak. Doctors called it selective mutism caused by severe emotional trauma. The finest specialists in America tried helping them. Nothing changed. Jonathan spent millions searching for solutions. Therapists visited weekly. Tutors came and went. Caregivers tried every method imaginable. The twins remained silent. They communicated only through notes and occasional gestures. As the years passed, Jonathan became consumed by guilt. His business empire continued growing, but his relationship with his children slowly faded. He buried himself in work because facing their sadness was too painful. The mansion became a place filled with everything except happiness. One rainy afternoon, a new maid arrived. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She was 32 years old and had recently moved to Connecticut after caring for her elderly grandmother for many years. Sarah wasn't highly educated. She wasn't a therapist. She wasn't a child psychologist. She was simply a kind woman with a gentle heart. The house manager gave her a brief warning on her first day. The twins don't speak. Don't expect them to answer. Don't push them. Don't ask questions. Sarah nodded politely. But when she first saw Ethan and Grace sitting together near a large window overlooking the garden, she noticed something others seemed to miss. Their eyes weren't empty. They were hurting. There was a difference. The following morning, Sarah was cleaning the library when she found several old family photo albums stacked on a shelf. Curious, she glanced through them. Page after page showed Rebecca smiling beside her children. Beach vacations. Birthday parties. Family picnics. Christmas mornings. The love between them practically radiated from every photograph. Then Sarah noticed something else. In almost every picture, Rebecca and the twins were doing something creative together. Painting. Building birdhouses. Gardening. Making crafts. Rebecca seemed to connect with her children through activities rather than conversations. Sarah quietly closed the album. An idea began forming in her mind. The next afternoon, she carried a box of old art supplies into a sunroom rarely used by anyone. Without saying a word, she sat alone and began painting. Not professionally. Not beautifully. Just simple paintings. Flowers. Birds. Trees. For nearly an hour she painted while the twins watched from a distance. They said nothing. Sarah said nothing. The following day she returned and painted again. This continued for an entire week. Slowly, curiosity overcame caution. One afternoon, Ethan stepped closer. The boy pointed toward a paintbrush. Sarah smiled warmly and slid it toward him. No words. No pressure. Just understanding. For the first time in years, Ethan picked up a brush and began painting. The next day Grace joined him. Soon the three spent hours together creating colorful artwork. Still no words. But something was changing. The children were smiling again. The staff noticed. Jonathan noticed. For the first time in years, laughter, silent but visible, returned to the mansion. Encouraged by the progress, Sarah continued finding gentle ways to connect. She planted a small garden behind the house. The twins helped. She baked cookies. The twins helped. She built bird feeders. The twins helped. Every activity reminded them of happy moments they had once shared with their mother. Painful memories slowly transformed into comforting ones. One evening, while cleaning the attic, Sarah discovered several unfinished scrapbooks Rebecca had been creating before her death. The pages contained family photos alongside handwritten notes and stories. Many sections remained incomplete. Sarah carefully brought them downstairs. When Ethan and Grace saw the scrapbooks, tears filled their eyes. For a long moment, they stared at the unfinished pages. Then something remarkable happened. Together, they began completing the albums. They added photos. They wrote captions. They organized memories. Day after day they worked on preserving their mother's story. It became their mission. Their tribute. Their healing. Jonathan watched from a distance, amazed. The children who had spent years trapped inside their grief were finally moving forward. Yet one enormous barrier remained. They still hadn't spoken. Winter arrived. Snow covered the estate in white silence. Christmas approached. The holiday had always been Rebecca's favorite season. For years, the family avoided celebrating because the memories hurt too much. This year felt different. Sarah suggested decorating the house. To everyone's surprise, the twins eagerly participated. They hung ornaments. Wrapped gifts. Placed lights throughout the mansion. For the first time since Rebecca's passing, the home felt alive. Then, just 2 days before Christmas, Jonathan received devastating news. A major business deal collapsed unexpectedly. The financial loss was enormous. Although he would remain wealthy, years of work had vanished overnight. The stress overwhelmed him. Late one evening, he sat alone in his office staring at old photographs of Rebecca. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry openly. He wasn't crying over money. He was crying because he realized how much time he had lost with his children. Years he could never get back. Years spent working instead of healing. Years spent avoiding his pain. Through the partially open office door, Ethan and Grace quietly watched. They had never seen their father so vulnerable. Never seen him cry. Never seen him look so broken. Sarah noticed them standing there. She gently placed a hand on each child's shoulder but said nothing. The twins continued watching. Jonathan buried his face in his hands. The room felt frozen in time. Then Grace took a step forward. A small step. A trembling step. Another. And another. She walked into the office. Jonathan looked up through tears. Grace approached slowly. For a moment neither moved. Then she wrapped her arms around him. The millionaire immediately hugged his daughter tightly. Tears streamed down both their faces. And then it happened. A sound nobody in the mansion had heard for 3 years. A voice. Soft. Fragile. Beautiful. Dad. One single word. But it changed everything. Jonathan froze. His eyes widened. He looked at Grace in disbelief. Then Ethan entered the room. Tears filled the boy's eyes. He stepped beside his father and sister. "We miss Mom too." Jonathan broke down completely. The twins had spoken. Not to a doctor. Not to a therapist. Not because they were forced. But because they finally felt safe enough to share their pain. The three held each other for what felt like forever. Years of grief poured out in tears instead of silence. Sarah quietly stood outside the doorway. She smiled and walked away, giving the family privacy. The next morning, Christmas Eve, the mansion felt transformed. Voices filled the halls. Real conversations. Real laughter. Real life. Jonathan gathered the staff and publicly thanked Sarah for everything she had done. But Sarah insisted she hadn't performed any miracle. She simply listened when others tried fixing. She cared when others tried solving. She loved when others tried managing. The true miracle had come from the twins themselves. They had found the courage to heal. And Jonathan had found the courage to grieve alongside them. Months later, the family created a special art center in Rebecca's memory, helping children dealing with loss and emotional trauma. Sarah became its director. The twins volunteered every weekend. And Jonathan devoted more time to family than business. The mansion that had once been defined by silence became known for something else entirely. Hope. Before we finish, please leave a special comment below. Kindness heals, if you believe one caring person can change someone's life forever. And if this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to people around the world who need hope and encouragement. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't finding the right words. It's finding the right person who reminds us that we don't have to face our pain alone. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of genuine kindness to bring a family back together.